New Orleans business trip, September 90. Hello, here I am riding on the airplane again. It is end of the year inventory time for PetServe in New Orleans. Sievert and myself are flying down to help with the warehouse inventory control system and things in general. There is a lot on my mind about business right now. I am having a hard time staying out of a depressed mood. Every time we have talked with Hill's management for the last few months, they keep bringing up the subject of contract termination of the prescription diets. There is no justice. It has nothing to do with how well we have represented the company or our sales growth. It is simply that upper management has committed themselves with the purchase of VCA and must make it profitable in order to justify their decision. VCA is a Hills-owned veterinary supply distributor. By taking over independent distributors' sales areas, like PetServe, New Orleans, and VetServe, Dallas, they can show increased sales if nothing else. Therefore, as I sit here on my way to visit Chris Muldry and the rest of the Louisiana crew, the question of what we will do if we lose the prescription diet contracts will arise. I have chosen at this point not to dwell on that decision until it is imminent. Instead, I have been trying to concentrate on doing all the things that will increase our chances of reversing the termination decision by Hills. We have been concentrating on increasing the customer base and sales volume with several promotions. A quarterly program of double discounts on prescription diet products is just ending. It was moderately successful. We are now starting a premiums program, making various gifts available on a point-earned basis. The overall strategy is to make ourselves so attractive to so many of the veterinarians that the Hills company will decide not to draw their wrath by cutting us off. The problem with this strategy is that the company management is so isolated that they seldom see the results of their decisions until too late. This seems to be about all we can do though, and what will happen, will happen. The loss of veterinarian business in New Orleans will probably add up to at least 40% of their sales. This means a total restructuring of PetServe in order for it to survive. We still have 2 more years on the Science Diet contract, so it would be foolish to fold the whole thing if we can restructure, lower overhead, and make a profit on Science Diet sales only. In the case of VetServe, Dallas, the loss would be of both Science Diet and prescription diet contracts. The company would have nothing to sell. For all practical purposes, we cannot reduce much overhead since VetServe is so closely tied with Southland. The loss of VetServe sales is almost completely a loss of profit to the start companies. The sickening thing is that both VetServe and PetServe are Hills' only companies started at the urging of Hills' sales management. The injustice of this is what keeps gnawing at my insides when I think of all the trips, hard work, and worries that I have spent while developing the organizations. When I dwell on it, I start slipping back into a state of depression. Let's talk about depression. When Dad sold his part of Southland to Rod, and Rod was having all kinds of problems, Dad was not able to handle the pressure. He would basically just have to turn his back on any type of confrontation because it tore him up emotionally. I was mentally tougher back then. Now, however, the years of hassling with Rod, the pressure of business growth and dealing with Hills and IAMS, and my own brush with divorce, has worn down that toughness. I find that it is easy to slip into depression. I worry about losing everything, or even losing part of what has been already earned, when I am making more money and my family life is better than ever before. It is hard to force my logic to overrule my emotions. It used to be easy. Hello, I'm back on the airplane Saturday afternoon and back to Dallas. Sievert and I completed the inventory taking at PetServe and headed home. I spent most of my time either cleaning up computer problems or scanning the inventory in the collar room. We ate 3 times at Denny's and once at Coleman's, so much for the cuisine of New Orleans. Merlene is due to have a gallbladder operation Tuesday. It is a new technique where 3 pencil-size incisions are made in the abdomen and 1 in the navel. A laparoscope is used while hooked up to a TV monitor, and the scalpel is a manipulated laser. The recovery time is reputed to be only 4 or 5 days, and her hospital stay is supposed to be only 1 night. I have been encouraging her to hold back on this operation till new technology makes it easier. This technique seems to justify my strategy. Today is Saturday, September 29, 1990. Just as I wrote down the date, I had a flashback to my youth. I remember daydreaming about what the world would be like in the year 2000, and wondering if I would live to see that era. Your perspective certainly changes as you get older. If I don't live to see the year 2000, I'm going to be damned disappointed. There are so many things that today are taken for granted, that we see nothing wondrous about. Surely if we examined jet travel, computers, television, and on, it would be a marvelous thing from the perspective of 1950. Christmas trip to Stark House 1990. If bigger is better, then this was the best yet. The Atwoods have become an indispensable fixture each year. Amy brought her boyfriend Brad and Trey brought a new friend from the neighborhood this year. The Exums from Tyler were new guests this year along with their two 16-year-old boys. Paw and Granny, Rod, and his 3 kids rounded out the guest list. Of course, my family of Merlene, Tiffany, Brandy, Kristen and her boyfriend Mark rounded out the list of 22 people for this season. Everyone has left for home and I am sitting here in front of the fire trying to adjust to the total silence of the mountains and trees. Normally this time of night the kids would be in the middle of a game of Uno or some other group wildness. This is our 4th Christmas since we bought Stark House and it seems as if each year is better. I am truly blessed to enjoy such pleasure from friends and relatives. As Penny and Brian were saying their goodbyes for this trip, they became quite emotional as they tried to express their gratitude for being a part of such a pleasant time. The kids had a couple of days of downhill skiing at Angel Fire. One complete morning was spent on the sled run in front of the house. We must have set a record for the number of trips down. I know I personally made more than 25 trips up and down hauling loads of sledders. All the adults enjoyed cross-country skiing over several days. This was the first time it snowed on this trip. The snowplow arrived and cleared the county roads about the middle of the afternoon. Funny how people must have their little things to worry about. Dad is worrying about getting the van out with still 2 or 3 days left. The kids are worrying they will not get a chance to go downhill again. The women are worrying about running out of food when we throw away more than we eat. And us men, we worry about why everyone else is worrying. Living in Stark House with 22 people gives you a chance to observe and reflect. Rod is in the process of divorcing. Mom and Dad are afraid of losing their grandchildren in the process. Sasha is failing in school and had a little emotional breakdown upstairs with Mom. She is shy and is up here with 4 16-year-old boys. Shiloh is getting an education from the older teenagers. It's funny to watch him react to some of the comments, jokes, etc. Shiloh found out that Arthur had recently moved out from his mother and in with his dad, Jim and Marianne. I understand that he and Arthur had some conversations. Tiffany's boyfriend Lemur did not come this year, much to the chagrin of Tiffany. She reveled in the attention of the younger teenage boys and others on the ski slope. I guess her ego bruised by Lemur needed a little healing. Amy's boyfriend Brad is alright but probably not the type son-in-law Brian would choose. The fact that he is the son of the Texas senator that passed the 3-wheel ban grates on him also. Brandy's back operation. For a couple of years now Brandy has been going to the Scottish Rite Hospital for the scoliosis in her back. We had hoped that the curvature would stop when she reached maturity and that an operation would not be necessary. The doctors kept saying that the spinal fusion with supporting rods would be necessary, but we hoped to spare her another hospital visit with all the pain and suffering. The curvature did not stop though, and her respiratory system was being more and more limited by the collapse of one side of her chest. She cannot stand much loss of oxygen because her heart problems limit the oxygen exchange through the lungs also. The risk of life because of her heart problems makes the back fusion operation even more risky. The longer we wait, however, the greater the risk becomes. Finally, Merlene and I agreed with all the doctors that it was time. In May 1991 Brandy went in for the big day. She was in the operating room 10 hours non-stop. The 2 surgeons worked straight through, but they used 3 shifts of nurses. The operation was at Children's Medical Center because of cardiac care. Brandy was glad to see some of her old nurses that she had met during the many previous days. After only 3 days we transferred to the Scottish Rite Hospital, where the nurses were more used to this type of surgery and the doctors were more convenient. You always see people who are worse off when at the hospital. We watched the black woman whose young baby died while in intensive care with Brandy. There was also the West Texas family whose baby had heart surgery and was having respiratory problems during recovery. We learned that it was Down syndrome, and of course this made for a closer bonding with these people. The last we heard, 3 weeks later, the great-grandparents and parents were still waiting and the child was still struggling in intensive care. Even now after 21 years we still learn not to underestimate Brandy. It is fun to watch other people, including doctors and nurses, as they begin to appreciate the depth of her understanding, humor, and affection. For example, the back surgeon who was talking about blood samples or shots while standing at the foot of her bed. She was so sore after the operation that she would only move her hand to make signs, she would not talk or move otherwise. As he mentioned the shots, she moved the fingers of one hand in a sideways waving motion. He thought she was waving a greeting and responded with a, "Hello Brandy, nice to see you." The sign was immediately read by me, Merlin, and Tiffany to mean, "Please leave, no shots." We all grinned at each other. We knew the, "Please exit now" wave, but let the doctor wave back in ignorance. When she's sick or in pain, it seems to take away her voice. The worse she feels, the tinier and fainter the voice gets, until she speaks not at all except with the hand signs. Ask her if something hurts, and the answer is always no. After all, she knows that to say it does hurt means a good chance that a shot or bad medicine will soon follow. She ain't no fool, she ain't dumb, she's just retarded. It's now a month after the operation and everything seems to be returning to normal. She has lost a lot of her flexibility because, as she says, back stiff. Hopefully, no complications will occur and her back problem will be over. Disney World 1991. Knowing that the dangerous back operation was impending, Merlin and I decided to take Brandy to Disney World. Chris took a week's vacation and it became a family trip with all the girls as Tiffany was on spring break. We flew to Orlando and rented a car for our coming and going from the theme parks. We had purchased a 4-day ticket for Magic Kingdom, Epcot Center, and MGM. We had a great time and thoroughly enjoyed being together as a family and doing the whole Disney thing. Having Brandy with us allowed us to take the handicapped entrance to the rides and shows. This usually meant no lines or waiting. The workers and the system really do cater to the disabled, and we really appreciated the special attention they gave to Brandy and us. My favorites were the different countries at Epcot and the aquarium. Brandy's favorite would have to be the spaceship ride at MGM. It was the only place that she asked to go to twice. The only problem was that the second time she got so excited that she leaked a little and wet the seat down for the next unsuspecting passenger. Merlin was so embarrassed that she dragged Brandy and us out of the ride at flank speed. We also visited the Kennedy Space Center at Cape Canaveral and got to see the space shuttle sitting on the launch pad ready to go into space again. It was a nice trip and might be the last true vacation that the whole family gets to take just by themselves. Mexican dog dip. Rod has taken on a renewed interest in the business. This is good and somewhat surprising, since he is in the middle of his divorce from Donita. His interest is primarily in advertising and in the retail store. I guess that was the reason he decided it was time Southland Farm Store had a spring dog dip. He lined up Roger Johnson, who is doing low-cost veterinarian clinics. He supplies a vet tech, and 2 helpers to administer rabies vaccinations, DHL, and heartworm tests. We have all the supplies and the tubs for the dog dipping itself. Since we are close to the Mexican-American side of town, Rod called the Spanish-speaking radio station KESS about advertising. We ended up buying a $650 remote with about 20 minutes of radio time. He also lined up Rudy's Tortillas to provide nacho chips and jalapenos, and the SPCA to solicit for donations. For a couple of days before the big Saturday, Rod took a crew of part-timers and went door to door handing out flyers talking about the coming attractions. Saturday was wild. I have never seen so many pit bulls and chows on logging chains and tow ropes. Almost no one spoke any English and almost none of us spoke any Spanish. Our vet showed up late and the line for vaccinations backed up 2 hours long and stayed that way all day. We had 40 to 50 dogs lined up waiting all day. The Chicanos were amazingly patient, but the dogs weren't. They barked and got into several fights. Visions of Saturday. The little Dachshund that was probably the worst dog of the day. He tried to bite or bark at everyone and everything. His owner was this meek little old lady, the pit bull that slipped out of the looped chain of his master. He was running around trying to start a fight with all the other dogs, and his master wouldn't get close enough to place the chain on his neck. He stood back and tried to lasso his own dog from a distance with the chain. The SPCA lady was so shocked by the dogs on chains. It was a great success and we should get many new customers from the proceedings. Rod did a good job and it was his baby. However, once or twice a year is enough, everyone agrees.